Hello, good morning. You're welcome to our Thursday Facebook series. Welcome today to today's edition. And today we are going to be doing an appraisal on the um, compulsory treatment and care for victims of gunshot wounds. Wounds Act 2017. I don't know if we all know that there was an act enacted on December 20, 2017, which regulates the compulsory treatment and care for victims of gunshot wounds. So today we're going to be doing an appraisal of that act. So, first of all, one of the characteristics of laws we know is that it is dynamic and not static. So, laws change and are changed with regards to the new developments in a given environment. So, looking at changing laws, talking about that, we can see that our constitution has undergone several amendments and modifications. Our present constitution, being enacted in May 29, 1999, and has since then undergone different modifications, is a thorough example. So now, in Nigeria, the government, the people of Nigeria are facing and have faced a lot of challenges, and of which health is one of the most depressing issues we are facing currently. So, in an attempt to underscore these problems we are facing in Nigeria, the lawmakers have enacted a law called the Compulsory Treatment and Care for Victims of Gunshot Wounds. And this act is what we are going to be looking at. The act has gone a long way, some ways has actually tried in curbing these menaces that we have faced with regards to health care and all that. So we are going to look at the act and like a highlight, yeah, and talk about the good parts and the not so good parts of the act. The lawmakers, the government, they have done so beautifully, and we can recall that it is a normal thing for someone to get shot and taken to the hospital, and the next thing you hear is where's your doctor's report when someone is dying. That is so normal in Nigeria that people don't even see it as a big deal. People don't see it as something wrong. I remember the last, I think that was 3 months ago. I don't remember, 3 months ago. I was here taking a topic which was about on patients' rights. And one of the things I talked about, like the main focus of the topic was the rights of a patient. Whatever patient you are, the right to be treated well, to be given emergency treatment, not to be explained to very well on everything you are to be treated with, and so many others. So today, this topic is somehow related to that, but the only difference is that this topic is only focusing on victims of gunshot wounds. And if you are not a victim of gunshot wound, you are not, this act doesn't cover you. So that is it. All these things happened prior to and are still happening because actually one thing we don't know is that laws are not just for lawyers. Like someone told me that he doesn't read the Bible because he feels it's just for pastors to read and interpret to us. Really. And I'm like, okay, that's the reason a lot of people swim in debt. In the debt now, I'm talking about mess like sin. Because most of these pastors don't even know what they are teaching you. They are teaching you why instead of the A that is in the Bible. So if you don't go through these things, how would you know who is telling you the truth? So talking about the law in that regard, we would say that laws are meant, the people who the law, with whatever law has been made for, are supposed to be abreast of that law. You're supposed to have the law at your fingertips. You ought to know what is your right, what you should be accorded to you, and what not. The lawyers are just there to interpret these laws. That's it. We are there to interpret these laws and to Yeah, interpret this law, not implement. Yeah, we are there to interpret. We are part of the judiciary. So most of the things that happen to us, most of the things that happen to people are because they are not aware of the laws, what is written in the book. But trust me, that's the reason, even after the implementation of these laws, we still find things like that happening because people are not even aware that these things are not supposed to be happening because there are laws now, there are laws that have been made to curb those things. So if you're not aware, how can you tell someone, no, you ought not to do this to me? How can you know what is due to you? How can you enforce it? So I really encourage all of us to go through these laws. You can start from somewhere. You can start from acts. You can start from anything, regulations, and now maybe go to the constitution. Just have a fair knowledge of all these things so that you are not led blindly. So that's it. Um, the emergence of this act here, like I said, has to an extent um, gone on eradicating on the unwholesome treatment towards victims of gunshot wounds. In the same vein, individuals were wary of helping gunshot victims because of the maltreatment and disrespect that recurrently came to them from hospitals. I know some people, like, it's a normal thing. You see someone on the road, maybe you witness someone get shot, and immediately you rush, pick the person up, rush the person to the hospital. You get to the hospital, and they start bombarding you with these questions. They start embarrassing you. No, 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 you have to tell us. How did you do this? And some people even drag you. There are lots of things that happen in Nigeria, things you can't even imagine. So if you happen to witness these things, don't say they don't happen. They do happen. You should just ask people who have witnessed these things. And yeah, ask people who have witnessed these things. So this law it's all encompassing with regards to things, events, everything that happens within and around gunshot victims. The taking to the hospital, the treatment, the discharge, and all that. So now this act has put a halt to so many things that used to happen or are still happening. But if you don't know these things, there is no way you can enforce them. So that is the reason we are here, to help you know all these things that you're not able to read. So, however, the act has had little involvement with issues of malfunctions of medical practices towards victims of injuries. Like I said earlier, the act is only focusing on victims with gunshot wounds and not victims of any wound at all that are taken to the hospital. For one, the Act only regulates issues relating to gunshot victims and leaving out all other victims of such abhorrent practices. There are a lot of things that happen in hospitals. There are a lot. If you don't have anyone, if you have not witnessed, if you don't have anyone who has gone through these severe embarrassments or unthinkable acts, you wouldn't know. So the Act specifically makes provision for the compulsory treatment and care for victims of gunshot wounds and leaving out the rest of the medical problems. There is a saying by the former president of United States, President George Bush, that goes, if you must play ball, play the big ball. So for me, if the government has seen that, okay, these things happen, why limit it to just gunshot victims? Why not just do everything so that we would know it applies to all other victims of any other injury, all other injuries? So why limit it? Having in mind the problems Nigerians are facing in the hands of medical practitioners, it would have been more appropriate if the lawmakers put into consideration all other problems with regards to medical care in making the instant law instead of narrowing it to victims of gunshot wounds alone. An all-encompassing law would have been most reliable. There are so many instances where victims of accidents have been deprived medical care for one reason or the other, and there are no specific laws governing such menaces. So evidently speaking, on July this year, yeah, that was July 2018, a young lady who was said to be a copper, she was to graduate the following day before she died. She went out with her friends, and however, whatever happened, she was shot on account of a stray bullet. So she was rushed to the hospital. That happened in Abuja here. She was rushed to the hospital. And on getting to the hospital personnel saw someone in a pool of her own blood, almost giving up, and what they were requiring was um, police report. That was so insane. Like, whoever can do that. Medical practitioners leave the main focus, the main purpose of their career, and they chase things that don't even make sense. How can you see someone dying? It's inhuman. How can you see someone dying and all you are asking for is money or police reports? That is so, that's, it's not nice at all. It's, no, 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 no. We shouldn't take that. And actually, the girl died. The lady died because they could not provide the police reports on time. Now, another scenario is on August 15, 2018. This one happened in the Federal University of Agriculture, Makurdi, Benue State. The school bus, which conveys students within the school environment, was conveying students from the South Core to the North Core when it developed bad rails, and ran into some students. Some died and some were still alive. So the students came immediately and rushed some of those people to the school clinic. On getting to the school clinic, all they were demanding for was a student's identity card. When all the students there were saying, no, this person is in my department, I know her, I even know her matric number, she is a student. She may not be like, it's very normal that someone would leave her room or her house without her student identification number, like just forget it there. Because you won't be hoping that anything of such would come up. So all they were demanding for was a student's identity card. And in the process, this young girl died. These people died. So looking at these two scenarios, someone can comfortably, without stress, easily institute actions against the people, the hospital personnel in the first scenario, but not easily do that to the hospital personnel in the second scenario, because in the first scenario we're talking about a gunshot victim, and the second one is not a gunshot victim. It was just a victim of an accident. So this is the extent this act has gone in not affording us breathing space. It's just too narrow to comprehend. Practically, okay, now we are going to look at the provisions of this act. The act basically has 14 provisions, and the 13th and the 14th one are similar, so I'm going to take them together. So the first one makes provision for every hospital or hospital personnel being under duty to give treatment to any person of gunshot wound. So long as you're a victim of gunshot wound and you're rushed to the hospital, this act mandates a hospital personnel, the hospital person or the hospital, whoever, to attend to you immediately without asking for anything, without even blinking an eye. The hospital personnel ought to provide the necessary treatment to anybody of gunshot wound. Yeah. The second provision is this duty to assist. The Act places a mandatory duty on every person, including security agents, to render every possible assistance to any person with gunshot wounds and ensure that the person is taken to the nearest hospital for immediate treatment. Also, a person with gunshot wound shall be received for immediate and adequate treatment by any hospital in Nigeria with or without initial monetary deposits, and the person shall not be subjected to inhumane and degrading treatment or torture by any person or authority, including the police or other security agencies. So, in this part of the Act, we can see it is very clear that the Act also condemns asking of deposits or whatever monetary kind of money from a victim before treatment. You know, even the basis of, if you go to the history of the medical profession, you would see that the profession is all about saving lives. And not even for the fact that you think after studying medicine, you are going to earn a huge money monthly, a huge amount of money monthly. It's not even for the ego. It's not for any personal advantage. The only, the only purpose, which is the only advantage, is that you'll be able, to the best of your ability, save lives. So, in the true sense, if you feel you want to study medicine, you have to really think about it, because it is not as we make it now to seem, it is not as we are now practicing, that someone goes to study medicine just because of the ego or just to put food on your table. Don't misunderstand me. Definitely, that is your career. You're supposed to earn a living out of it. But the most important thing is not to earn a living. It is to save lives. It is a work of compassion. That is it. And not for whatever that goes outside saving someone or people's lives. So this act condemns even the treatment of patients wrongly. You can go, if you go to, maybe sometime you should just take a walk, take a stroll, just go around hospitals if you are permitted, and just sit somewhere and watch what happens. You see that in Nigerian hospitals, a patient is rushed to the hospital. Even the nurses, they don't even care. If you complain too much, they'll tell you, what is wrong with you that we've not seen before? They can push you, they don't care. They ask you for deposit, you can't provide it. They say, you can stay there, and die. I just don't, I don't like imagining these things because they are so wrong. So, however, this act, as little as the provisions are, have come to curb these menaces, these inhumane treatments to victims of gunshot wounds and other persons around that have anything to do with victims of gunshot wounds. Then another one we are going to look at is that the Act also places a mandatory duty on every hospital that receives or accepts any patient with a gunshot wound to forthwith, that is immediately, with immediacy, report to the police after they have taken the person in for treatment and commenced treatment on the person. They are supposed to give a report, a notification to the police of what has happened, who the person, and all that. So we can see that the Act has limited the duties of the patient, which is perfect. So now the hospital is the one who has the right to notify the police of whatever, and not the victim or his relatives running around to go to the hospital to make go to the police to make reports, to get reports before being treated. So another one we're going to look at is certificates of fitness. The Act places a mandatory duty on the police not to invite any person with gunshot wounds from the hospital to the police station for any enquiry whatsoever, except where the chief medical director has certified the person fit to go out, and the person not being in their need of hospital treatment, medical treatment. Like in Nigeria, we know that a patient, a victim of gunshot wound can be taken to the hospital, and where you're still unable to get yourself, you're still unable to know what is happening around you, and you're asked, police comes to arrest, to tell you, it's arrest, I would call it arrest you and take you to the police because of some investigations, some inquiries that ought not to happen until you are certified fit to leave the hospital. So this act talks about that, and makes us to understand that that will be wrong of a hospital to allow, and of a police officer or a police station to implement. Another one is, the Act provides that any hospital that receives or accepts any person with a gunshot wound for treatment and fails to make a report of the fact to the police commits an offense and is liable to a fine of 100,000 naira. The Act goes ahead to say that every doctor directly concerned with the treatment will be equally liable on conviction to a term of 6 months or a fine of 100,000 naira, or both. So, this part really made me happy. When I got through to this part, I was very happy. The Act is not just telling you, see, do this. The Act is not that lenient. You can see that there are penalties for disobeying. The only problem we have is knowledge. We don't know these things. That's the reason they keep happening. Like the incident I talked about, I made mention of, that happened in July this year, that a lady was shot, taken to the hospital, medical police report was demanded. That happened after the enactment of this act. The act, like I said, was enacted on December 20, 2017, and this happened July 2017. So tell me, if people, I'm sure these things happened January, February, March, April, May, June. But because people do not know, are not aware of these provisions, nobody has been taken, no hospital personnel has been taken to the court. And for that reason, even hospital personnel who are aware of these provisions still go on for their selfish desires, because they feel no one is going to come after them. No one knows this thing enough to report for implementation, or for enforcement rather. So another one we are going to look at is, the Act provides that the police officer who receives the reports or facts from the hospital shall on demand furnish the hospital or the appropriate agencies with the background information on the victim, as the person may be compelled to incriminate the victim. Here talks about the fact that the patient is already undergoing treatment in the hospital. After the hospital makes a notification at the police goes ahead with its investigations, and after the conclusion of the investigation, comes back to give a report on what they have found. And this also would make you understand that the Act does not care if you are a robber. If you actually went to steal something, you were a robber, you were caught, or whatever, you were doing something illegal before you were caught. No. The Act tries to point out the relevance, or the most important thing, which is saving lives. We say the Act, in, like, if I can speak for the act, it would say save lives first, and then we talk about the penalty of what the person was doing before the person was shot. So this now, and also saying the part that the Act says, and the police may be compelled to incriminate the victim, shows that the victim maybe, yeah, maybe had done something wrong in the process, and was that instigated the getting shot, that instigated getting shot. So the person would have probably done something that made him or her to be shot. But notwithstanding, the person's life will be saved first. So another one talks about, the other part talks about, the act provides that the police officer that fails, neglects or refuses to give the report required from the investigation commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine of 50,000 naira or imprisonment for a term of 6 months or both, which also buttresses the first part I talked about, which is about the fact that this also this kind of shows danger that the person, the victim, maybe is like was actually doing something wrong before he got shot, but however his life will be saved first, even if investigations tell that he was committing whatever illegal activity. His life will be saved first. Another one talks about the act that provides for any volunteer or help of the victim of gunshots to be treated with respect and not to be subjected to unnecessary and embarrassing interrogation in their genuine attempt to save life. You know, because of this part, a lot of people desisted from saving lives. Because you know that when you pick up someone on the road to take to the hospital, you get to the hospital, you are being asked. So sometimes you get arrested from there. You get arrested from there to the. I think I have seen the day we went to Kuje prison for prison intervention. A young man who we met with someone else was arrested just because he rushed his friend to the hospital. So these things happen. They happen on a daily basis. So because of this, a lot of people said, no, if I'm going to help someone and then fall into trouble, I'd rather not help. So the act has come to expunge all these activities, all these problems. Another one is that the act provides that any person who commits an offense under the act, which results to substantial physical, mental, emotional and psychological damage to the victim, commits an offense and is liable on conviction to imprisonment for a term of not more than 15 years and not less than 5 years without an option of fine. So this part talks about also the penalty for anybody who commits an offense under this act. The person is definitely going to go in for it. It's not something about, okay, don't worry, I will not do it again. Sorry. You were supposed to know, like you were not supposed to do it. So ignorance, like we say, section 22 of the criminal code says that ignorance is not an excuse, and it can never be. So that you did not know before you did it is nobody's business. You're going to go in for it. And another one talks about the fact that the act also provides that any hospital that receives any person with gunshot wounds shall notify the family members or relations of the victims as far as they may ascertain within 24 hours of becoming aware of the victim's identity. So within 24 hours that a hospital receives someone for treatment, someone with a gunshot victim, within the 24 hours the hospital receives the person for treatment. The hospital, as far as they ascertain from the person who his relatives are and all that, they shall mandatorily give notification to the person's relatives or family members. And all these things are part of the neglecting to do all these things are part of the offenses, which, yeah, they may sound trivial. Sorry, they are not. The act is not joking, and you go in for it. There's no excuses. I'm actually trying to round up because the time is fast spent. Fast spent. So another one also talks about the fact that the act provides that any person or authority, including any police officer, other security agent or hospital who stands by and fails to perform his duty under the act which results in the unnecessary death of any person with gunshot wounds commits an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine of 500,000 naira or imprisonment or both. So, 500,000 naira or imprisonment for 5 years, yeah, or both. So this also goes ahead to show you that the act is definitely not joking. Like, it's a normal thing that you go to hospitals that patients are rushed in, victims are rushed in, people almost die, giving up, are rushed in, and you see a nurse chewing gum and pressing her phone. It's so normal, and this act is saying that it is wrong. But my only offense is that the act is narrowing it to just victims of gunshot injuries. However, another part of the provision is that the Act also provides that any hospital or facility that takes or receives for treatment any person with gunshot wounds shall keep adequate records of the treatment. Hospitals should endeavor to keep records of whatever that goes on in the course of treating a patient with gunshot wound. Then the final part is restitution. Okay, I'm going to explain restitution to you. Restitution is recompense, means recompense for loss or injury. So when we talk about restitution in this part, on this act, the act provides that the head of any corporate body that commits an offense under the act shall be prosecuted and on conviction fined the sum of 500,000 naira or imprisonment for a term of 5 years or both, and shall in addition be ordered by the High Court to make a restitution to the victim by directing that the head of the corporate body to pay to the victim an amount equivalent to the loss sustained by the victim. In addition to any other penalty under the Act, the High Court shall order a person or a corporate body convicted of any offense to make restitution to the victim by directing that person or the corporate body to pay the victim an amount equivalent to the loss sustained by the victim. The order of restitution may be enforced by the victim or by the prosecutor on behalf of the victim in the same manner as the judgment in a civil action. So, in other words, whatever the victim has lost in the course of all these things that you have done wrong, you have to, when the High Court finds you liable, aside the fact that you're going to go in for it as pay, you're going to pay penalty for that, you may go into maybe imprisoned, you also have to make a recompense to the victim. And this restitution can be enforced by the victim when he is alive, if he is alive, or by his prosecutor. Now, I'm going to conclude. I'm going to conclude by saying that the Act has unburdened a victim of gunshot wound, in the sense that before December 2008 and 2017, that's before the enactment of this Act, the victim was the one who had the whole burden. You had to be the one who gets the police report, get the money, notify your people, do everything. But now the Act has gone a long way to unburden these people and put the whole burden on the police and the hospital, which is how it's supposed to be. Actually, I commend the lawmakers for the provision of this Act, because I always advise people, if you want to learn something, learn the good one. At least we are learning the positive, the beautiful things from the western part of this world, because all these things are the things they hold in high esteem. They don't joke with lives. So instead of learning these things that don't add value to your life from them misbehaving and all that, it is best we learn these things which are focused on saving lives. So in the light of the foregoing, it is clear that the Act is not well equipped. Like I said, it is just narrowed to victims of gunshot injuries. Besides the aforementioned defect of the Act, another issue the Act did not put into consideration is the terms of restitution in the event of a victim's death. Though the Act makes provision for restitution to be made to the victim by directing the offender to pay to the victim an amount equivalent to the loss sustained by the victim, which order of restitution may be enforced by the victim or the prosecutor on behalf of the victim. in the same manner as a judgment in a civil action. There is no provision for the restitution to be made to the family of the victim in the event of the victim's death. However, we hope that just as the Constitution has undergone several modifications, that this Act will also undergo some rigid modifications. Worthy of note is the enforcement of this Act. A victim of such menace should not hesitate to put his grievance before the table of the appropriate authorities. A law without enforcement is a waste. This law has come to amend the broken parts and not to sleep. There are organizations who are awake to legal assistance in pursuit of human rights, and Lawyers Alert is one of such organizations. Please, I urge all of us, I urge us, whatever happens to you that is within this context, or within the context of which we have, of the topics we have discussed earlier, or whatever you're not sure of, maybe we've not discussed, whatever you are not sure of that ought to be happening to you or your relative or someone you know, please, we are always there to welcome you. We are always here. We are working for you. We are working to make this Nigeria a better place. So please, help us to help you. Thank you so much for being with us. Thank you for enjoying this Thursday series with us. Please do stay with us as we come through to you next week Thursday with another exciting topic. Thank you. Have a nice day.